But for energy, this is requested paper, The Religious A Priori in Otto and Its Kantian Origins by Jacqueline Marina. And this is forthcoming in a book on Luther, Barth, and movements of theological renewal. So this is a new paper, actually. Yeah. Here's a presentation by Jen Ismail, Cracks in the Edifice of Determinism, which was terrible, Jen and Ismail. You don't have to do anything, you'll still just break on. Oh, that's true, that's always true. But that's streaming. If there's no technical difficulties, that's the less usual situation. There's almost always some sort of technical difficulty with streaming. Either it's on your side or it's on Twitch's side. It's almost inevitable. It's not even a real stream. Yeah, if there's no technical difficulties, it's not a real stream. But yeah, this is The Religious A Priori in Otto and Its Kantian Origins, Jacqueline Marina, by forthcoming in Luther, Barth, and Movements of Theological Renewal. I don't know what this is. This is the abstract here, but we're gonna read this and try to explain it. It's my first time reading it. As always, feel free to jump in with questions. I will do my best to answer them. This is not my area. I don't know what the heck's gonna go on, but we're going to give it a shot. That's what we do here. So, and we'll do our best to understand what's going on, why they wrote this, and maybe like if they had a point and why they decided to put so much time and effort into writing something and getting it published. So here we go. How can revelation be interpreted and interiorized? This was Otto's burning question at the heart of his dissertation on Luther's understanding of the Holy Spirit. There he had, among other things, reflect on two propositions from the Lutheran Catechism. Quote, the Holy Spirit does not work without means. He is bound to the Word and works through the Word. End quote. Douglas says, common sense says you can just say no to Laplace's demon. Is that how things work? You can just be like, I don't think so, demon. That's not what I say. You're just wrong and bad. Yeah, I mean, there are reasons to disagree with determinism. It's not going to be easy because you have to take science very, very seriously. We have a world that is built on scientific knowledge and like the benefits of science. It's not like we can deny that at this point. It's not like you can go back a few hundred years and be like, nah, we've learned some stuff, but it doesn't really matter. It's like, no. So the idea that like you have to be rather sophisticated if you're going to say cracks in the edifice of determinism. But like, yeah. Anyway, that doesn't matter. That's side to what we're dealing here. The Holy Spirit and the Word. Anyway, going back to this. Otto struggled with the validity and intelligibility of the propositions on several fronts. First, of itself, the Word is not a sufficient condition of faith. It is only opened up through the Spirit, remaining dead to the natural human being. But insofar as the work of the Holy Spirit precedes, accompanies, and makes possible the understanding of the Word, this is, quote, a work of the Spirit before the Word, end quote, and is as such an action of the Spirit without means. That's without means, contradicting the first part of the formula. Tindio says there are no demons, so we're fine anyway. Well, that's true. But, I mean, the point of the demons is usually a thought experiment. It's not to actually say, like, Descartes' evil genius exists or Laplace's demon exists. Yeah. Douglas says, if my space dimension and bend into my time dimension leads me to strongly suspect that determinism is likely. Again, these are big questions. If you think you're going to solve them, like if you think you're going to solve a determinism question with science, you're wrong. Science presupposes, or at least lots of versions of science, presuppose that things are deterministic. Science says this is how the future is going to be given the initial conditions. That's a deterministic thing. You're not going to solve that with science. You need something else. And so it's going to be hard. Ivan here, a resident scientist. Even physicists aren't sure the world is deterministic at the quantum level. Many physicists still subscribe to the Copenhagen interpretation. Determinism just tends to be a red herring with respect to free will. That's fair. In the philosophy discussion, yeah, it's a lot of the question is with respect to free will, and that's right. And yeah, so the question is, well, the quantum level is one thing, the macro level is another, and how do those interact with respect to determinism? But that's the point, is that these theories we have, they have certain relationships to determinism. And so you have to do something different. So according to Neo Ivan, I think this is correct, that there are quantum interpretations that are maybe less deterministic, or not. Maybe they're more just probabilistic. I don't know exactly. But you're not going to solve that with more science, because that is the science. And so you need a new theory. Well, no, where's the new theory going to come from? Well, you tell me. Okay, but we are back to the theology here. Okay, so we're worried about the question in this paper, though. It looks like Otto is, or the history here that this paper has started off with. The question is that how are we supposed to interpret religious doctrine? Because the divine, whatever it may be, operates through the word. It is in some sense bound to the word of God, and that's how it works in some sense. But then how do we understand that? Because you have to understand it, but that's sort of after the fact. How is it to operate through it? And if our understanding is after the fact, then how can we understand what it was actually doing before the fact? We're just like sort of reflecting on it, but what it does, it has to understand ahead of anything we like, in some way that we don't understand it. Yeah. So, okay. Because it's not a reflection. It has to already know the word. How does it do that? We don't know. Okay. Second, Otto questions the intelligibility of the notion that the Holy Spirit works through the word. So now it's a through, and as opposed to So yeah. So see, before we were doing understanding. This is understanding the word, and then this is how it works through the word. So how does it operate, and how do we understand it? Two different questions. Douglas says, I live my life with the assumption that I have free will, so I'm not that concerned with one way or the other. Illusion is perception. Perception is as real as I need. That's fair. Yeah. And that is one of the arguments that philosophers make. It's that our experience is one of free will. And so even if the science tells us something, our experience is contrary to what the science says. So we have to square that somehow. A lot of people are just compatibilists and says, well, you feel that way. That doesn't make what you feel correct. And that's a major sort of like position. And because a lot of things are like that, just because you feel a certain way about something doesn't make what you feel like the way the world is. I mean, like fuck your feelings sort of shit. Kraft says, I don't understand this article. The revelation is by definition a personal, subjective, and interior experience. Well, that may be the case, Craftus. But we haven't even gotten off the first page yet. We don't even know what the real question is here. We're just setting things up. We're talking about understanding the word and how the Holy Spirit works through the word. I have no idea what this comes down to, but they're going to have to get more. We're not even out of the first paragraph. So give it a sec. Okay, and this is why I start early on some papers, is because it's going to take some time. This is a longer paper. All right, I mean, granted, this is at 1.5 spaces, so this may not be the longest paper, but like there's plenty to get through here. Like, it's not double space, but maybe 1.5. All right, so this amounts to the claim that one energy works through another and is just as nonsensical as the claim that light gives out its light through warmth. A close analysis of Luther's claims leaves the question of the efficacy of the word shrouded in mystery. Why is it received here in one way and there in another? The word is not a magical formula that immediately arouses faith. It has instead a significant content that must be interpreted and appropriated before it can give rise to a life-altering faith. This content can be variously received and can even fail to have an impact altogether if the mind is altogether too preoccupied with other things, or if the individual has no sense for religion. You only read the first sentence? Well, there you go. Ivan says, I think the problem is that people aren't clear in their conceptions of free will. Libertarian free will is just logically impossible, but that's fine because it's useless. Well, I agree that libertarian free will is just logically impossible, and it is useless. So we agree on this one. And most people aren't that clear on their conceptions of free will also. I actually very much dislike the contemporary discussion, and so I'm holding out for something new and different in the future. I really dislike because, as you say, that what most people take as free will, I find unhelpful. Like, it's not a good concept. It's not doing any work for me. A lot of the stuff has to be operationalized. It has to be useful in my life in some way. And the concept of libertarian free will, which is what most people think of nowadays as free will, It's just ridiculous. Holding out for a hero, exactly. Energy says, I believe libertarian free will is possible if you believe in agent causality. Yeah, so there's ways to make it work, Energy. It's just I don't like any of those theories. And it may also be that it's logically impossible, as Ivan has brought up. A lot of people don't think it's sensical because it causes too many problems. But like, yeah, again, you can always double down. You can always dig your heels in. You can always just like take a stand and be like, no, this is the way the world is. Everyone else's theory is wrong because this is how the world is. This is how our experiences are. And that's fine because things go back and forth. And a lot of times we find some way to make it work. We just may not have it right now. Holding out for a hero. What is my concept of the word in this article? I have no idea. We're waiting to see what's going on. We're just saying, like, they just are bringing up at this point that not a whole lot of this stuff actually makes a lot of sense. How are we to interpret this? So we're going to find out, I think, Dojo. Yeah. And that's also, Kraft, just what Ivan's saying, is that it wouldn't make any difference. I think Dojo was saying something similar. It's that people like the idea when they talk about it, but it's not doing us any good, and quite often it's kind of nonsensical. And Ross says Free Will is a dope Rush song. That is correct. Alright. Rush is pretty good. Alright, already in the dissertation, Otto was preoccupied with the human structures of consciousness that make appropriation of revelation possible, as well as the condition of the possibility of genuine religious experience, concerns central to his oeuvre, how do you say this again? Oeuvre as possible, his works as possible. His body of work. This question of how the outer of revelation should be united with the inner structures of consciousness was the basis of what he called a science of religion, one founded on the groundbreaking philosophy of Immanuel Kant. Okay, so how, assuming there is some sort of divine revelation that exists in the world. So this is what we're saying. There is something that's divine out in the world that we have access to. How can we have a necessary ability to understand it? Because it's divine, it is something that we have access to, so therefore we must have access to this. And so we're going to have a Kantian thing here. Yeah. Holding up for a hero. Okay. By 1909, Otto had published 2 books stamped by his reception of Kantian philosophy. The first, Naturalism and Religion, argued that Kant's transcendental idealism was uniquely suited to assign religion its proper place given the success of modern science. Hey, Anti-Someone, what's up? Can't stick around, but I just wanted to pop and say hi. Really liked your new paper on finding common ground. Thank you for taking a look at it. I appreciate that, Anti-Stoneman. I'll probably have to reread it to understand better, but I was excited when I saw it was building on the Wittgenstein wager. Yeah, that's what I did. Thank you. Always have a good evening, and hoping this religious a priori gets a brain dance. I hope so, too. You never know. Yeah. All right. Yep. Okay. So we're doing Kantian stuff. So again, something's out in the world. It's the phenomena out there, and we have to be able to it's the noumena. It's the thing of the gods out in the world. We see the phenomena. We somehow have to take that in, and our brain has to be, or our consciousness has to somehow be prepped or ready or available to receive the religion, the divine revelation. Of course, like the author said, there can be things that will fuck us up if we are not prepared to recognize the divine revelation. But we, as humans, necessarily have to be able to appropriate the divine revelation, even given the success of modern science, as I said earlier in the paper. Kant posited 2 distinct domains, phenomena and noumena. Noumena. I can't speak today. Oh my God. The first is the realm of appearances or empirical realities. Here nature is presented as the measurable and quantifiable and as a subject to strict causal laws. See, again, we're doing science. We're talking about causal laws. It is a closed system for every natural event must have a cause that is itself an appearance. An appearance, the realm of phenomena, is not fully real, and Otto continually reminds his readers that this is something that the mystics were already aware of. On the other hand, according to Kant, phenomenal realities are grounded in the realm of noumena, or things in themselves, which, as such, make no appearance and remain unknown and unknowable. These are, Otto argued, the true realities that are the genuine subject matter of religion. Kraft says not divine revaluation if you understand it. Most you can do is interpret it, which becomes something mundane. Well, that's where we're going. That is exactly where we're going here. So we've got the phenomena, we've got the things in the world, which includes the divine and whatever stuff that is, the phenomena that we recognize, and then, yeah, that's exactly where we are in the paper. So that's right. Well, at least the author agrees with you at this point. Yeah. Doja says, what way can we or must we appropriate the divine revelation? Do you mean manifest in some way? I don't know. That's, I think, part of the background theory that Otto was working on. Assuming there is divine stuff out there, then we, as things in this world, have to be able to deal with the divine stuff. Because I think this is working in a broadly Christian, like they were saying Luther. So this is a broadly Lutheran perspective on the world. So they're assuming some sort of Christian deity, I guess, and like theology and whatever else goes along with that. So how is it that we can recognize the Lutheran God or the Christian God of the Lutheran type? Yeah. So one would search in vain, argued Otto, to find God among the real of the phenomena, all of which were subject to scientific explanation. To think of God as a God in the gaps of our knowledge of phenomena was a losing proposition. We must rather turn our attention to the intelligible world grounding the phenomena if we are to ground a science of religion. How this was to be possible was further expanded and contextualized in a second 1909 book, The Philosophy of Religion, based on Kant and Fries. Fries? I was like, I like some fries. Potatoes are good. In which she presents Kant's philosophy as received by Fries in broad strokes. Most significant in this work is his emphasis on Kant's critique of judgment as containing the key to the science of religion. Okay, so we're trying to say, look, science is good. Science is great. We're doing something different here. This is more going to be Kantian metaphysics, but we are still recognizing the fundamentality of science, even in the space, even while like still recognizing the divine. We're not getting rid of the science here. In 1911, however, Otto embarked on a journey through North Africa, the Middle East, and India, and in these travels he had several remarkable experiences, one especially in a Jewish synagogue in Morocco, where he heard the Trisagion of Isaiah. These experiences, rupturing all rationalistic accounts of religion, gave rise to the phenomenology of religious experience described in the idea of the holy. There, Otto describes the holy as containing non-rational elements that can only be apprehended through feeling. These feeling elements are, as he notes, sui generis and irreducible to any other mental states. Considered from the point of view of the phenomenology of the history of religions, they are what first appear in religious life, and they do so devoid of any properly ethical content. Only later are they gradually filled with the ethical, what Otto calls the schematization of this primary datum. Okay, so now we have, instead of just divine stuff out in the world and our ability to somehow figure it out despite our world appearing to be scientific, because we have special faculties, we also have primary experiences that are felt but are not rationally cognizable. Energy says that phenomenology here described similar to Husserlian Heideggerian phenomenology is a different sense of the word they're referring to. Okay, so this is also 1911, so this is pre-Heidegger. So I would say this is not Heideggerian. Now, is it Husserlian? I doubt it. It doesn't look like it is, but I don't know. I would suspect that there's some sort of like they're using phenomenology. This is my guess from the usage in this passage, is just saying the subjective experience of the phenomena. So you have experiences that you feel that are not rationally or scientifically analyzable, and those are devoid of content, but you still have those experiences. And so like they're just sort of like, is this Latin here, sui generis, that means completely unique, and like it does not relate to anything else. So they're completely unique and irreducible. So it would not be like Husserlian phenomenology, because Husserlian phenomenology is usually, okay, you can step back and have like it's called a bracketing in his phenomenology. You step back from your normal way of viewing the world and just sort of like try to take it in. These are unique experiences in themselves and not a general perspective of like trying to step back from your everyday reality. But good question. Kraft says, by divine I don't mean in a religious way, I mean it's the spark of knowledge of instincts, which are somewhat spiritual like hunches. It's basically the angelic knowledge of personal beliefs based on life experiences, hunches, the grand spirituality versus the Luciferic knowledge, which is empiric data, statistics, and logically derived. Okay, I mean, that's fair. I don't, like, we have to see how this author is fitting this all together. I don't know enough of the background to give you, like, yes, you're right about this, no, you're wrong about that. I don't know. But that's like what we're doing. But you see, again, we're dealing with something unique up here, like something that is not like that's very special, and then later down here, like you start understanding it when you I don't know, I don't know what you do later. It just says only later are they filled, whatever this meaning of filled is, because I have no idea. Okay. Concerns similar to those found in his analysis of Luther are fundamental to his analysis in idea, namely those having to do with the structure of consciousness making these experiences possible. And while Kant's division of existence into phenomena and noumena, as well as his exposition of the holy and purely moral terms, could not by themselves accommodate Otto's remarkable insights regarding the holy's irrational aspects, Otto still believed Kant's philosophy similarly suited to illuminating the possibility of religious experience, its ground in the structures of the soul, and the relationship between its rational and irrational elements. In this paper, so yeah, see, now we finally got past the introduction. In this paper, right now, the author first provides a brief description of Otto's analysis of the holy, in particular its irrational elements. I then move to discuss how Otto understood the structures of consciousness, both grounding the experiences of the numinous as well as allowing the irrational elements to be schematized by the rational element. This analysis will take us deep into Kant's analysis of the two stems of human cognition and their possible relation to a common root, which Otto links to what the mystics call the ground of the soul. Dun dun dun. So yeah. So we're gonna go deep diving on the Kantian metaphysics here, and maybe Luther or Christian mystics. So that could be interesting. Kraft says, yeah, when you act on something and you only reason why you did it that way, you can describe it as divine inspiration, but also you only call it with the connotation of benefactory when those instincts help you. Otherwise, you'd call your action as a dumb mistake. Yeah. So that's fair. Like sometimes you do things on gut instincts, and when it works out, you're like, well, that was divine inspired. And when your gut doesn't help you, you're like, well, that was a dumb fucking move on my part. So yeah. But again, you don't want to read too much into don't blame God for your benefits and your mistakes. You want to at least try to, I mean, you can, but I don't know how far you're going to get with that. But like, yeah, that's kind of what's at issue here. What are these religious experiences and how do we rationalize them when they are inherently irrational, at least to start? Okay. And you do bring up a good point. The formula for superstition. Well, the good point I do want to bring up is that a lot of things we don't understand at first. And it may have nothing to do with the divine or the holy. So how do we start to rationalize the things we don't understand in this world? Because it doesn't have to be that complicated. Like there may be social things you don't understand, maybe scientific things you don't understand, natural things. You'd be like, why are these animals acting in this weird way? And they keep acting that way. Well, there's a lot of things we don't understand. It doesn't have to be that fancy, like to be divine or like holy or whatever. But like there's still like good analysis here. Doger says, I hate all the connotations of irrational. Otto followed the Jacob phrase, which is more about the outside rational. Example might be aesthetics. Okay. So like there's the outer, which is okay. There's rational and then there's things going on, but it's not exactly irrational. It's outer rational. Kraft says, exactly, keep in mind that 5 planters are in retrograde this week. Yes. Gandalf Eagle Wampus, what's up? Did anyone else tune in because the streamer is low-key handsome? Why, thank you, Gandalf. I do get some compliments on my hair, but sure, I'll take whatever. Hey, I'll take whatever I can get. As I always say, I don't actually ever, I know, Not I don't actually. I never look at the lurk list. Everyone's free to lurk here. I know not everyone wants to talk during my streams. You're welcome to, of course. But please don't call anyone out. And if you just want to sit and admire, that's you're welcome to do so. Yeah. Yeah, okay. Girlfriend says, sweet. Gam says, not gonna lie, reminds me of my stepdad that reported me to a child psychologist because I ate some rocks. Well, I mean, were the rocks tasty? Even though I literally saw in document that it was good for your digestion. Well, if you're a bird, maybe. And we joked on him because they found I was in the top 99 IQ. I had over 60 IQ points, and they put me in a special class ever since. Exactly. Yes. You're over 60 IQ points. It's wonderful. Okay, so now we're doing analysis of the holy. According to Otto, what we understand as the holy contains two elements. The first is the rational element. It is amenable to the human understanding, can be apprehended through concepts, and is especially associated with the ethical sphere. The note is especially sounded in the prophets of the Hebrew Bible. Amos, for instance, preaches, quote, take away from me the noise of your songs. I will not listen to the melody of your harps, but let justice roll down like waters and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream, end quote. Giggity holy, yeah. Miles kilometers. I bet me has an IQ over 60 over IQ. I can tell. I hope so too. I mean, I don't really like IQ. I'd hope to be over 60. I was not in any special classes in school. So, you know. I mean, if you get too low or too high, they do put you in special classes. But like I was in public school. I'm a product of public school. So maybe just because there wasn't any special classes, but that's a different problem. Trump loves high IQ individuals. Trump also loves low IQ individuals. Steve the John says, I don't believe in that shit. I don't either. Not everyone gets into special classes. I know. Yeah. Yeah, and Craftus says, I believe IQ is just scam born from eugenics. Yeah, it usually is not. I don't find it a very helpful concept. Okay. Immanuel Kant famously identified the holy with morality. In his lectures on the philosophical doctrine of religion, he defines holiness as, quote, the absolute or unlimited moral perfection of the will. A holy being must not be affected with the least inclination contrary to morality. It must be impossible for it to will something which is contrary to moral laws, end quote. According to Otto, however, this rational element of the holy is to be contrasted with its non-rational element. Two features are particularly significant about this contrast. First, the non-rational element in the holy. Actually, now that we've got some people here, we got some shout-outs I gotta do. Our first shout-out will be Dead. Is Dead? Let's see if Dead's still here. Dead is still lurking. So we gotta go give Dead the Wraith. He was the first one here. He gets the first shout-out. If you guys don't know Dead the Wraith's the man. He's been playing some variety games. He was playing like he had like a convenience store. It was like convenience store simulator. I don't know what it is. But Dead Wraith is got some great stories. Had some good conversation. You go hang out with there. I found him through Katie, the professor's wife X. Like it's good fun. So go give Dead the Wraith a follow if you have not hung out over there. That's good times. So yeah. But yeah, we got some friends in chat since we got some people here now. Okay, so we got the rational and the non-rational, and these two particular these two features are particularly significant about this contrast. First, the non-rational element in the holy is first and foremost apprehended through feelings and intuitions, and not through concepts. Moreover, what is apprehended, what Otto calls the numinous effect. The numinous is felt to have sheer overplus of meaning. I have no fucking clue what a sheer overplus of meaning is. That cannot be adequately expressed through concepts. At best, the experience can be suggested by what Otto calls ideograms, metaphors, and analogies that point to the experience and that help to evoke it. Hello, Adam. What's up? Yeah. Dory says, I've been spending all my IQ points on the internet. Yeah, haven't we all? It's just like doom scrolling and bullshit. The only way Crafter said help me was to get a scholarship from Austria. Yeah. Okay, yeah. So if they use a IQ test, then go ace that shit. So there you go. If you got a 169, that's fucking great as far as those things go. And 800 euro is even better. Okay, second, the idea of the holy is synthetic. Rational and non-rational aspects of the holy are not contained in one another. That is, one cannot, through an analysis of one element, derive or unfold the other. Otto dubs these rational elements of the holy synthetic essential attributes. While we are certainly justified in predicating rational attributes to the holy, quote, we have to predicate them of a subject which they qualify, but which in its deeper essence is not, nor indeed can be, comprehended in them, which rather requires comprehension of a quite different kind. End quote. There says, damn, the highest go was 135, never beat 140. Yeah, and this is why IQ tests are not very helpful. I don't know, like, the difference between, like, being over, like, 100's the average. So either you're going to be slightly over or you're slightly under, but I don't know what actually means past that. So maybe it's tracking some sort of average thing for the time, but, like, this is why I don't really like them. At best, you're going to get a unbelievably rough sort of grading on people. But, like, again, I'm not very good at music, and some people are very good at music, and it's like, you don't test me on my musical ability. You don't test them on, like, writing really boring philosophy papers. Energy says what they're describing as numinous sounds similar to the concept of sublime, which, to my understanding, Kant describes in the Critique of Judgment. Yeah, I think that's where we're going, Energy, because this is very Kantian. I completely agree. I was thinking about that sort of thing when I was reading it. Kraft says Mensa tests are pretty standard. Last time I got 180. All you have to do is do them in long enough because it's just a matrix. And that's the other thing. You can get better at these things too. And that's just a question of training. So if it's a question of training, is it really reflecting anything other than, well, you can learn shit, which most people can. That's always what a problem is on these sorts of things. Adam says, what is a holy concept? Does the author say just got here? No. We are assuming because this is kind of historical in nature, that we are in a Kantian sort of setup. That's how Otto sees it. We're talking about Otto here. So there is the divine out in the world, and that's part of the noumena. So the numinous, as we were saying, the noumena. And then there may be phenomena that we, can interpret, like, scientifically or whatever. But then there is something about us that means we can get at the divine. And that's part of the question here, what's going on. What's up, Sock? Now, how you doing? Kraft says, it did say at some point that's a subjective experience, not explicable for others. Yeah. And so it's a unique, sui generis, irreducible experience. That's correct. So there is something about us that allows us to actually access the divine or apprehend it or take it on in some way. We don't know what that is, but it's kind of assumed because this is in the Lutheran tradition. And so it's sort of a Christian understanding of the world. I've been okay. You're talking to Stock down. Okay. At some point, yeah. Okay. Oh, there we go. And back to the paper. Now, it is important to note that the rational and non-rational elements of the holy are not two distinct concepts that we can simply predicate of the holy. To think of them in this way would be to treat both aspects of the holy as elements that can be comprehended in concepts. And while this may work well enough with the rational side of the holy, it would completely B, we're missing a B. It would be completely inadequate to picking out the numinous quality of the holy. This, as Otto notes, can only be apprehended through feeling. Yeah, so this is the stuff that is not part of like our phenomenal world. It's part of the actual world, not just what we see phenomena, no concepts here. We feel it somehow. So we have a special reception for feeling the divine. So it can only be apprehended through feeling, which, as I will show in section 2, is that faculty through which something that stands outside the self is directly and immediately apprehended. Yeah, so we're getting the holy in some sort of very direct way. I know you guys can't really read that. I got to fix that color. All right, the feeling elements through which the numinous is apprehended are simply the direct effects, so to speak, of the numinous itself on our psychological constitution. The numinous is not to be confused with these feeling elements themselves, but is rather that which evokes such feelings to begin with. Key expressions associated with it in Western literature are the Hebrew kadosh, the Greek alios, and the Latin sacer. Sacer? Yeah. Yeah. Graf says, I can't believe studying math can't do basic subtraction because it doesn't help me. Yep. And he says, if it's sui generis and as an experience privately experienced by the individual, how can one conceptualize it, giving in the Wittgensteinian private language argument? To my understanding, you can't conceptualize experiences that can't be shared by others. Yeah, and that's part of the difficulty, energy diameter. I don't know. We're going to see what this author says. So there are other traditions. Of course, you don't have to be Wittgensteinian. You can just be straight Kantian, and maybe you can do it in that system. Now, you have to judge for yourself, is this a realistic theory of, like, religious divine revelation? Maybe it isn't. Maybe it is. Maybe this is what... Because Wittgenstein was very also interested in these sorts of things. He was very interested in religious experiences, but he also thought that you couldn't describe them. And so this idea that you could describe them in this way, he would say you're talking nonsense. That doesn't mean they don't exist for him. That just means you can't describe them using language in this way. And so, but you can see the author here is actually taking some care to be like, this exists in the Western tradition. So yeah. Okay, Stockton's trying to do some politics again. Yep, okay. The Mr. Word trying to comprehend. Yeah, we're all trying to comprehend here. Yeah. Adam says, I see Otto, if well versed, should mention Kant's description of the noumenal mind then, right? It was only external noumenal stuff out there. Yeah. So that's the issue, is we're working this broadly Kantian framework, Adam. And so we'll see. Yeah, so... Yeah, you're talking to some people like talking to used car salespeople. Yes, it is, Sock. Now you're not going to get anywhere because they're trying to sell you a story or sell you a lemon, whatever it is. Okay, a large part of Otto's over consists of a compelling phenomenological analysis of the feelings presaging the numinous. He identifies three principal moments in the apprehension, which is experienced as a mysterium tremendum et fascinans. Okay, so another mysterium tremendum et fascinans, we should point out, is our buddy Ivan Neo. That's definitely a mysterium tremendum. So go give our buddy Ivan a follow. Ivan talks science, philosophy of science, mathematics, Bayesian epistemology. And so if you want to go talk like the hard science, actually, that's where you go do it, and how it relates to philosophy. So we've been doing, he does a bunch of like, physics, does a bunch of epistemology over there, Bayesian epistemology, good stuff. So yeah. So give our buddy Ivan a follow. And that's from the more, scientific modern perspective than this is. But again, we can discuss. Yeah, Mysterium Tremendum et Fascinans. All right, he first begins by providing an analysis of tremendum, which can be further analyzed into three distinct movements. Yeah, team naturalism, exactly. There are A, that of awfulness, B, that of overpoweringness, and C, that of energy or urgency. The three moments are intrinsically related and can easily pass over into one another. Otto describes the elements of awfulness, and I think this is awfulness like being full of awe, not being awful, like, because there's an E in here. I don't know if you guys can see it right there, but like there's an E in this awful, because in like not being terrible as in awful, but in full of awe. So one can describe the full of awness as a sense of being absolute unapproachability of the numinous. Yeah, so this is, you're being overwhelmed, as Energy said earlier, the sublime. You're just getting overwhelmed by the world, of the way the things are, and you can't even it's unapproachable because it's just too great for you. Yeah. Awful joke here, exactly, Semiotics. Yeah, what's up, Rocco? This is well illustrated in the story of the burning bush in the Hebrew Bible. When God calls Moses from the burning bush, God adjures him, quote, "Come no closer, remove the sandals from your feet, for the place on which you are standing is holy ground," end quote, and Moses is afraid. This sense of the unapproachability of the holy brings with it a peculiar dread of a completely different nature from the fear that can be experienced of objects in the natural world. To mark something off as hallowed is to mark it off by this feeling of peculiar dread, which recognizes its numinous character. For instance, after Jacob receives the promise in a dream at Bethel that he is afraid and exclaims, quote, "How awesome is this place? This is none other than the house of God, and this is the gate of heaven," end quote. Significantly, the story marks the origin of the northern sanctuary at Bethel. Yeah, so again, we get this all over the place. You don't need to have it in the Christian Western tradition. You can have it other places too. But it's like, the God has overwhelmed, like something has overwhelmed you. It could be just a natural phenomenon, and you'd be like, this is holy. Rocco, hi, yeah, how to learn more about this a prior knowledge I keep hearing about? Yeah, good luck with that. But yeah, I wish I had a greater access to the a priori, my friend. I would wish I knew more about it too. Adam says that is a deep passage, though. It's saying God declared a holy area, not necessarily saying that the objects are holy. Yeah, that's also another good point. It's a place. The place is holy. The objects in it are part of that place, but it's not just that, like, the rock itself is holy. The rock is part of that place, and so it's a bit more of a complicated thing, and that's a good point. Yeah. Out of reverence, he takes off his shoes. Yeah. A priori, yeah. So, I mean, I'm not particularly religious, but you have to take the concept seriously because these are things that have, like, shaped our humans over thousands of years. They've had force on us for a long time. And so there's a lot going on in these ideas. And even if you don't buy the idea of, like, a holy place, these ideas have affected people for a long time and they have pulls on us. So you got to at least try to understand why these concepts have such pull sometimes. Yeah, okay. You're talking to Ivan. Okie dokie, Craftus. Alright, so Otto notes that this feeling of dread is the starting point in the evolution of religion. It first begins as the experience of something uncanny or weird. Also, quite often what is said to be the start of philosophy. The feeling can take the wild and demonic forms and can sink into an almost grisly horror and shuddering. Examples from the Bible include the Ima of Yahweh, fear of God, which Yahweh can pour forth to paralyzing effect. In the New Testament, we find the strange idea of the wrath of God, analogous to the ira deorum of the Indian pantheon. As Otto notes, this ogre is nothing but the tremendum itself, apprehended and expressed by the aid of a naive analogy. The analogy is naive because the notion of wrath implies purpose and emotion, but a closer analysis of the tremendum shows that no such purpose or emotion is involved, for the element of awfulness, the full of awe, has two other features worthy of note. Energy says, out of curiosity, are you not religious in the sense of being agnostic about whether God exists, can be known or not convinced of atheism? I make no use of any sort of religious thought in my own thinking. I don't think about God. I don't use it in any way. And so in some sense, the questions don't even register personally. You can ask me about them. And it's just like, I don't know what you're talking about. I am a very thoroughly argument first person, and I have no experience of the divine. I have just my everyday bullshit, and that's how I get by. So agnostic about whether God's existence, like, what do you even mean God's existence to me? Like, it doesn't register. Things that exist are like pencils and hands. Like, that's, like, God's not even on the table. Yeah. So, but I mean, but like I said, that doesn't mean I don't take what people say seriously. I take what people say very seriously. I have to. This is what, like, drives the world around. This is what the world spins like this. But like me, I'm like, yeah, my hand exists. Like, if you're gonna ask, like, where's God? I'm like, well, God's not here in the room with me, is he? And like, if you say, well, God's everywhere, it's like, that doesn't count. Yeah. So, yeah, if you want to call that atheism, I'm with them generally. Craftus says, when I was growing up, atheism meant a lack of religion, like a non-believer, but that would believe in the supernatural was if there was proof, but agnostic means you would refuse to believe in God even with God, but now the definitions are changed. Yeah, these things shift over time. Yeah, so again, if in Mr. Word, yeah, if you have a personal experience, and I know people have these experiences, who am I to tell you what your experience is? Like, I'm just some guy on the internet, on Twitch at the moment. So it's like, I'm not telling anyone one way or the other what to experience. And I mean, I know lots of people that say they have these experiences. I have not. My dad was a religious person. I am not. He had religious experiences. I have not. Maybe something will come of this one day. Maybe I'm just one of these people that just has, like, too preoccupied with other stuff. But, like, yeah, that's just kind of my existence. What's up, laughing? Spinoza enters chat. Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, of course, also in the Western tradition, we have things like the cosmic horrors. And I feel like that we're getting very close. This is like kind of the same time, like that this, like Otto was writing at the turn of like the 20th century. Also, when we're talking about like cosmic horrors like Cthulhu and stuff, where you can't explain what's going on in these things out in the world. And this is a very similar sort of understanding of like the divine, except of course the cosmic horrors give no fucks about us. So yeah. Appreciate your existence too, the Mr. Word, and all the lurkers and everyone in chat, and everyone else on Twitch, and everyone else in the world. Yeah. So, but keep in mind, like, you don't need to do this in the religious context. You can just do it like, hey, maybe aliens are like this for you. Fine by me. Okay, this is an orge. I don't know what this orge is. Let's call this orge. I called it an ogre. That's saying stuff. Okay, first, this orge is devoid of moral qualities. Yeah, well, this is just something out there. We don't know what it is. Second, the way that it is kindled and manifested is quite strange. It is, quote, like a hidden force of nature, like stored up electricity discharging itself upon anyone that comes too near. It is incalculable and arbitrary, end quote. Yeah, so again, cosmic horror. You can do Lovecraftian stuff. This is has a Lovecraftian feel to it. There's things out there that's just like these things of energy or power that affect us. And it may not affect us for the better. Of course, if it's divine, then it is affecting us for the better. But Lovecraft is just like, ha, that's funny. It's like, you don't know. Okay, the strange story of the Ark of the Covenant in the Second Samuel is illustrative. When Uzzah reaches out his hand to steady the Ark, he is immediately struck dead. The tremendum is experienced as such a force of nature is further evidence of the insufficiency of the analogy with the idea of wrath, which has as its basis the idea of personal purposiveness. Yeah, and of course y'all have seen Raiders of the Lost Ark. Like, you know. Raph just had a lot of paranormal experiences. Cool, but since it happened without my consent, I'm a replicate. I don't care about it. Can't answer it now. Why should I bother? Yeah. Adam says, so would black holes destroying everything in its path a cosmic horror that is kind of cosmic, or little cosmic horror, or a tree in the storm smashes and kills everything right away down the street? That happens in the last week in LA, by the way. No, that wouldn't be cosmic horror at all. I mean, physically destructive stuff in nature, be it a storm, a tree falling over, or a black hole, would not count in this thing. This is something that's sort of like on the other side of a reality pulling on us. The black hole is very much in our reality, and we would fall into it, but that's the same as like we could fall down a hole, or fall into the river, or a tree fall on us. And so they're of a different sort of thing. It's more like a ghost fucking with us than like a tree falling on us. So it's like something slightly outside of our explanation working on us. Black holes, we understand the properties. I mean, not if we go inside them, but like on the outside, we understand gravity just fine for the most part. We'd understand we'd fall into it. Like, that's subject to science. This thing here is not subject to rational analysis. Yeah. I mean, they're cosmic in the sense of cosmos, but like not what we're talking about here. Like they're horrors in terms of outer space, but that's a different problem. Okay. Associated with the experience of awfulness or being full of awe is the experience of the tremendum as an overpowering might. Its concomitant is the feeling of the self as impotent, as a mere nullity, as something that is not entirely real. Yeah, see, this is the issue, is that if you're going to talk about these things, it's nullifying our reality. The black hole exists within our reality. And these sorts of things they stand apart. They're outside, they're over and above. Something that stands apart, that's outside and over and above, is our buddy Baraday. Baraday is on the other side of the world from me. He's out in Australia. And that is over and above my understanding. But he is also working on philosophy, working on the concept of charisma and how it affects like societies and politics, and sort of like the interesting interaction of how we organize ourselves. So go give Baraday a follow if you're interested in more philosophy content. He's finishing up his PhD, only 5,000 more words, as always. Crafton says black holes can be replaced by any other object. Black holes can be reduced as objects and have gravity. As you know, they act on objects. Gravity remains the same. Yeah, gravities are in our world. These are things that nullify the existence of our entire universe. Baraday says, just read Hume versus Kant on causality, so this paper makes more sense than it should. Yeah. I mean, this so far, in terms of the writing, it sounds like this is a competent writer. Like, this is a competent author. I don't know any of this history, really. But the way they're breaking stuff down here makes a lot of like historical sense. Like, this seems like this is historically situated in a very understandable way. So as far as philosophy and history of philosophy goes, this seems to be it's well situating itself. Now, do I understand any of these things about Otto and Lutheran theology? No, I don't know any history there. But like, other than that, yeah. Trevor says this article seems okay and you're not a fan of this? Yeah. So, and Barody agrees. Yeah, so, again, not my area, but does that mean I'm going to hate on it? No. As far as I know, this is like a good historical paper, like, so far. Granted, we're about a third in. Abraham, for instance, refers to himself as, quote, but dust and ashes, end quote, in the presence of the Lord. Only the noumen is felt to be absolutely real. This apprehension of the noumen has both ontological and valuational components. The noumen is not only that which is absolutely real, it is also felt as that which has absolute worth. This experience is at the heart of mysticism, which witnesses that the I is not essentially real, and which rejects the delusion of selfhood as manifested in the ego. Adam says, so a cosmic horror, the idea of being something like a ghost would be metaphysical, goes against the notion of naturalism. This could be someone like Descartes' evil demon. You could be a caterpillar dreaming it is a butterfly if the evil demon wanted. Yeah, that's right, Adam. This is getting outside of our normal sort of physicalist, scientific understanding of things, where you get to do these sort of weird things. You could be a caterpillar dreaming it was a butterfly, dreaming it was a human, or vice versa. And that's not something we really have an ability to do. We actually know what it is like to be a butterfly? No. Crafter says, in my opinion, philosophy should only be discussed at 2 a.m. when you're open the second barrel of wine. So in other words, what you're doing right now, Crafter, so it's probably past 2 a.m. for you. So we're doing everything correctly. That's right. Lastly, partially implied by the experience of the tremendum as an overpowering might, but containing other elements as well, is the experience of the energy and urgency of the noumen. This is the experience of the living God, of, quote, a force that knows not stint nor stay, which is urgent, active, compelling, and alive, end quote. Yeah, and this is why it's sort of outside of reality. It's affecting all of the reality all at once. And it's not like a force that's like local, it's just a constant pull on all of reality. This energy is captured in the New Testament, saying, quote, it is a fearful thing to fall into the hands of the living God, end quote, and, quote, indeed our God is a consuming fire, end quote. The energy of the noumen is absolutely unendurable. Even Moses cannot see the glory of God, but only God's back, for, quote, no one shall see me, God, and live, end quote. In love mysticism, it is experienced as the fire of divine love that the mystic can hardly endure. Yeah, so fair enough. The horrifying images in chapter 11 of the Bhagavad Gita are especially apt in capturing the awfulness, overpoweringness, and energy of the noumen. When Arjuna desires to behold God himself in his own form, this petition is granted, and he sees Vishnu, quote, touching the heavens, glittering many-hued with yawning mouths, end quote. People, quote, hastening enter into thy mouth, grim with fangs and terrible, some caught between teeth appear with crushed heads, end quote. And finally, the grisly image spreads to include whole worlds. Quote, thou devourest and lickest up all the worlds around with flaming mouth, filling the whole universe with radiance, grim glow thy splendors, O Vishnu, end quote. The image conveys the absolute power of the divine over all finite being. This power is, however, like a force of nature. It is an all-consuming energy. Its horrifying indifference to human purposes demonstrated by the fact that it consumes whole worlds containing both good and bad alike. After Arjuna has witnessed this, he asks to understand what he has seen, but the petition is not granted. What he has seen must remain incomprehensible to him. This brings us to the next characteristic of the holy, its mysterious character. Yeah. The numinous is apprehended as mysterium. It is something that strikes us dumb and that brings us with it amazement absolute. this holy other, this Gans Anderis, it is wholly other, since it is immediately grasped as something that is of a completely different nature than anything that can be known by the, quote, natural individual. The mysterium is, quote, that which is quite beyond the sphere of the usual, the intelligible, and the familiar, which therefore falls quite outside the limits of the canny and is contrasted with it, filling the mind with blank wonder and astonishment, end quote. Yeah, so this is the mysteriums. This is the stuff that we can only sort of be like, well, it happened, but I can't tell you what happened. As such, the numinist completely transcends the categories of the mundane. Concepts that are applied to things in this world are only analogically applicable to it, for it is of a radically different order than the world or anything in it. Ivan says, this is very angels on the head of a pin. These phenomena are pretty well explained by neuroscience. Yeah. So these are all metaphysical descriptions of things, and there's plenty of ways to explain them away. These people, I take it, the author and the people who are in this discussion, do not want to explain these things away. They think they're important. So, I mean, go figure. You don't have to take their word for it. But, like, the idea that it's radically different from anything in the world or anything in it, it's like, okay, well, then what exactly are you talking about? And they're going to be like, well, it's different. You have to just, you had to have been there. And, you know, people are not all going to buy that. But, I mean, this is what they say it is. And, again, you have to take what people say seriously to get at what they're doing and what kind of experience they have or had. But you also don't have to buy it wholesale. Okay, continuing. While we can have a positive experience of it through feeling, it eludes all apprehension through concepts. Here lies the genesis of negative or apophatic theology that stresses the fact that all our concepts are inadequate to it. The concepts we use to refer to it, such as mysterium, are mere ideograms for the unique content of feeling. That's a quote. In order to understand these ideograms, the person, quote, must already have had the experience himself. Yeah, it's like you just had to be there, man. You just had to be there, bro. Can't tell you. If you know, you know. What the numinous is, cannot strictly be taught. It can only be evoked, awakened in the mind, as everything that comes of the spirit must be awakened. End quote. All of this carries with it the implication that the category of the numinous is sui generis, that is, it cannot be reduced to other categories such as that of psychology or the social sciences that strive to understand the human being in merely naturalistic terms. Yeah, so what Ivan is saying is that we can, of course, describe this in naturalistic terms, and they're like saying, no, you cannot. And so you're at a bit of an impasse here, and because they're going to say you cannot do it. This is a unique thing that does exist, and the scientists are like, dude, look at the science. Despite its daunting character, the Numen is also experienced as fascinating. It is an object of search, desire, and longing. Augustine's famous words well express this fascination, quote, "You have made us for yourself, and our hearts are restless until they rest in thee," end quote. As such, the numinous ultimately must be sought out, for only it will quench the deepest desires of the soul. Otto notes that, quote, "Above and beyond our rational being lies hidden the ultimate and highest part of our nature, which can find no satisfaction in the mere allaying of the needs of our sensuous, psychical, or intellectual impulses and cravings. The mystics call it the basis or the ground of the soul," end quote. The Numen is ultimately experienced as the source of unspeakable bliss, a bliss that is completely different order from natural happiness. Otto speaks of the, quote, "wonderfulness and rapture that lies in the mysterious beatific experience of the deity," end quote, an experience which is beyond comparison with any earthly joys. This element of wonderfulness is vaguely apprehended at the very beginning of the religious quest and is at the heart of the fascinating element of the Numen. Yeah, so this is drugs. This is what I get from this. This is drugs. You get that hit, you're like, damn, I want that hit again, and you keep searching it out. And it's some otherworldly, mysterious shit that you can't tell people, but you're like, I need it. I'm going to go find it. And, yeah. Ivan's like, yeah, drugs. I mean, like I said, you got to take people seriously, though. It's like, this is how they describe their world. Not my world, but like, who's to say I'm right about anything? I'm right about very little, so the variety of human experience out there is tremendous, and I've seen my little slice of it. So it's just like, who am I to say what else is out there? All right, 2, the religious a priori and the ground of the soul. But how does Otto envision that an a priori feeling for the Numen, the non-rational aspect of the holy, is possible? So again, now we're trying to rationalize the whole concept here, because we just said you can't rationalize it, but then how do we even describe something we can't rationalize? And as someone was saying earlier, the Wittgenstein matters here. Like, you're saying, well, we can't talk about it, but you've been talking about it for the last few pages. How do you actually talk about something you said you can't talk about? Does that even make sense? Or do you have to be with Wittgenstein? If you understood what I said, you have to get rid of this. It doesn't make sense. It is through sensation that individual objects are given to us or intuited, but sensation is an empirical faculty, not an a priori one. In the first critique, Kant argues that space and time are a priori forms of intuition, but it is hard to imagine that the a priori intimation of the feeling elements of the holy are analogous to those forms. Yeah, so do we have a category of divine apprehension? Probably not. Maybe we do. Maybe we have a category of divine apprehension that is just like our apprehension of space. Perhaps. Evan says we should be kind to people, but we shouldn't respect everyone's ideas. Some people are just horribly wrong. Yeah, it's true. I mean, I'm not fussed about people that believe in religious experiences. That is not very high on my priority list. I'm more concerned about people that want to treat other people like crap. So maybe I'm a little too nice to them. I don't know, compared to you, Ivan. But on my scale of things, this is actually fine. I don't care. If you want to believe in religious stuff, it has no effect on me. So yeah. And he said, I appreciate your generally non-judgmental approach to religion. Even as a religious person myself, I'm not concerned that other people don't believe in God. I care that other people are reasonable and tolerant. Yeah. And like I said, I am an arguments first person mostly. And so I am also interested in the metaphysical arguments here. I find them interesting. I find this tradition interesting. I am not Kantian. I'm not religious. I'm not Christian. I'm historically Jewish, so I'm nearby some of these ideas. But this is in the Lutheran tradition, it looks like. So I've not really experienced them. But this is still interesting stuff. These are not stupid people. So it's what did these people think was going on, and why would they think such stuff is a good question. It's worth people's time. Yeah, all right, so we're talking about the first critique of Kant, where he argued that space and time are forms. But yeah, do we have a category of the holy? I doubt it. And the author says it's unlikely. The other two a priori elements discussed by Kant in the first critique are the concepts of the understanding and the idea of reason, neither of them suitable candidates for Otto's a priori feeling elements through which the Numen is apprehended. Yet Otto stresses that without the a priori, the word cannot be apprehended, received, or understood, and he invokes Kant's claim that while, quote, all knowledge begins with experience, it by no means follows that all knowledge arises out of experience, end quote. In a very significant passage, he notes, quote, Kant's rational idea of absoluteness, completion, necessity, and substantiality, and no less those of the good as an objective value, quote, refer back to, quote, an original and underivable capacity of mind implanted in the pure reason independently of all perceptions. And he continues, quote, in the case of the non-rational elements of our category of the holy, we are referred to something deeper still than the pure reason, at least as this is usually understood, namely that to which mysticism has rightly named fundus animae, the bottom or ground of the soul. The ideas of the numinous and the feelings that correspond to them are quite as much as rational ideas and feelings absolutely pure, and the criteria which Kant suggests for the pure concepts and pure feeling of respect are most precisely applicable to them. End quote. How are we to understand this element that is still deeper than pure reason? Is Otto still working within the parameters of Kant's philosophy? Yeah, and so here's where we're getting. It's saying we're going to break something up in Kant's philosophy that he's trying to, I guess, where my guess is where we're going is we're going to make something specific, or we're going to break something into two, and we're going to say, look, this is what it is to be rational, and so it is fundamental, but we can understand it in multiple ways, and that's where we're going to get this sort of divine apprehension. It's partly rational, but is what part we'll find out. Okay, yes, he is. So we're breaking it into two. There are two important places where we need to look in Kant's philosophy. Both of these places were significant for the romantic reception of Kant's work and its opposition to Fichte, especially in relation to how Kant's thought was applied to religion. The first place is Kant's remark at the end of his introduction of the First Critique, where he notes that the two stems of human cognition, namely sensibility and understanding, quote, may perhaps arise from a common but to us unknown root. Okay, so this is Kant was hedging his bets, and this sort of religious divine strand is part of where Otto's getting in. This unknown root is original consciousness, that is, consciousness prior to its reflection in the I think. If there is any place to look for an idea corresponding to Otto's fundus animae in Kant, it would be here. The reception of Kant's work between 1785 and 1799 was marked by the attempt to understand the relation of this original consciousness to totality. For Fichte and those who followed him, an absolute philosophy of first principles was possible through a reflection on the activity of the I, that is, on the conditions of the possibility of the achievement of the identity of consciousness through the process of reflection. Quote, the I posits itself as an I, end quote. Because the not I is necessary for the positing of the I, it too is considered an achievement of consciousness. The Romantics countered this philosophy of first principles through their claim that original consciousness is factical and is given to us in feeling, namely the feeling of being. And factical usually means a fact out in the world, so there's something out in the world. So we get the fact that we exist, that there's an I, through the feeling of being. Alright, so that's the opposing to the rational. We get the fact through a feeling. So you can see how this is working. We're getting a fact through a feeling here. While the totality of existence is intuited in this original consciousness, it cannot be penetrated by understanding and reason. There is then no philosophy of first principles, no absolute philosophy. The ground of existence surpasses consciousness and its conditions. We are confronted with the sheer facticity of our existence and are an enigma to ourselves. That was a weird, I don't know what was going on with that. And are an enigma to ourselves. Instead of an absolute philosophy penetrating the very ground of being, what we have is an epistemological modesty and a coherence theory of truth. What we can know is limited to what is given in reflection, that is, self-consciousness, but the material given to reflection is but a fragment of the totality of original consciousness and its awareness and can never come close to capturing it. Yeah. A little bit. Yeah, I don't know. But you can see this factical analysis, and this is getting closer to how Heidegger talks about the world. There's things out in the world, and it does stuff, and that's what we understand, and that's what the world is. And so we have this factical breaking off the totality. In Heidegger, that'd be a Dasein. And so you've got the being out there, and then we reflect on that. But the Dasein itself is beyond our, that's the full being. We don't have access to that. It's just kind of opaque. But now we're getting into a bit more of a Heideggerian style being here that, it does go back to these sort of Kantian structures. Okay, the second place to look for Kantian influences in Otto is Kant's third critique. Kant's successors sought totality and original consciousness in the moment prior to reflection, through which the I distinguished itself from the not I. The Romantics argued that this totality was given an original consciousness as a purely factical one that remained unknown and unknowable. Kant believed that we have ideas of such totalities, ideas of God, the soul, and the world as a whole, but these are merely regulative. They can be thought, but we can neither prove the existence of their objects, nor can objects be given to us in intuition. Nor can their objects be given to us in intuition. Nevertheless, these totalities are represented to us in what he calls aesthetic ideas, saturated intuitions symbolizing them. What we have in Otto's idea of the holy is precisely such an aesthetic idea, one that opens up consciousness in a way that it is brought back to that moment of original consciousness in which the soul stands in direct relation to existence and its ground. Yeah, so we can't have the idea of the God, but we can have some aesthetic representation that draws us towards the idea of God. In the third critique, Kant refers to the quote, ground of the unity of the supersensible that grounds nature with that which the concept of freedom contains practically. End quote. Discussing his critique of the faculties of cognition with regard to what they can accomplish a priori, he remarks on his division between understanding and reason, the former having to do with what can be known of nature a priori, and the latter having to do with the legislation of pure practical reason. But to this he adds, quote, intermediary between the understanding and reason, end quote, namely the power of judgment, which contains, quote, in itself a priori, a proper principle for seeking laws, although merely a subjective one, end quote. These three, understanding, judgment, and reason, are related to three faculties of the soul, quote, the faculty of cognition, the feeling of pleasure and displeasure, and the faculty of desire, end quote. The third critique is concerned with how an a priori feeling can be accounted for, or more precisely, how a judgment based on feeling can have universal validity. For example, aesthetic judgments have what Kant calls subjective universality. Here we have a judgment based on feeling, which is, as such, peculiar to the subject, but which nonetheless is valid for everyone. Kant answers that such judgments are possible in virtue of the harmonious exercise of the cognitive powers of the subject as it judges. This harmonious exercise pleases and pleases universally. What then is the power of judgment, and how does it shed light on Otto's category of the holy, both in its rational and non-rational aspects? Alright, so this I don't think is particularly clear here. They should have given an example, but think about like the idea of beauty. I find something beautiful, and I'm like, oh, that's so beautiful. It's so beautiful, and so I find that pleasing. And you can say, look, other people are going to find it beautiful too. And so this is a purely subjective thing that I find beautiful in some sense. That's my rational judgment of it. But again, you can sort of be like, that is beautiful, and the beauty's out in the world. It's not just my subjective judgment. So it's a universalizable understanding of my subjective, how it made me feel. The beauty out there made me feel this way, and it is beautiful, and other people will experience that, even though it's my subjective recognition of that beauty of that thing. I think that's what's going on here. Okay, the power of judgment is, quote, the faculty for thinking the particular as contained under the universal, end quote. There are two kinds of judgments possible, determining and reflective. When the universal is given and the particular is simply subsumed under it, the judgment is determinative. However, when only the particular is given, the universal must be searched after. Judgment is reflective. Now, what is significant about reflective judgment is that it is concerned with a singular intuition, and how it is that this intuition is to be grasped in such a way that it can be taken as an individual that falls under a concept. Longinus, I don't know how to say that, I apologize, Longinus, rightly points out that there is an aspect of reflection even in the application of the categories, quote, for it presupposes progress from sensible representation to discursive thought, the formation of concepts through comparison, reflection, and abstraction, which is just what reflective judgment is, finding the universal for the particular, end quote. However, the third critique is concerned with merely reflective judgment, and what happens in such a case is that, quote, the effort of activity of judgment to form concepts fails, end quote. In reflective judgment, we are first and foremost concerned with given intuitions. In the case of merely reflective judgment, an intuition is so saturated and rich that it is impossible to find a single rule of synthesis adequate to it, and as such, the individual cannot be grasped in such a way that it can be subsumed under a given concept. This happens in the case of judgments concerning the beautiful and sublime, as well as in the case of teleological judgments. In these cases, the particular is so saturated, has such an overplus of meaning, that it breaks all bounds of inner worldly significance and intimates the rational ideas of God, soul, and the world. Okay, so we finally got there to the beautiful. So you start thinking, okay, this is so beautiful that it transcends everything, and that leads you on to, well, there must be a God, because how else could this beauty exist in this world, because it is so overwhelming. Kant defines spirit as, quote, the animating principle of the mind, end quote, which works through the purposive settings of the mental powers, setting the mental powers into motion, that is, into a play that is self-maintaining. That's a quote. This setting of the mental powers into motion occurs as the mind tries to find a rule of synthesis for the saturated individuals that we find an aesthetic idea. Importantly, Kant relates the aesthetic idea to the idea of reason. He notes that the animating principle of the mind, quote, is nothing other than the faculty for the presentation of aesthetic ideas. By an aesthetic idea, however, I mean the representation of the imagination that occasions much thinking through without it being possible for any determinate thought, that is, concept, to be adequate to it, which consequently no language fully attains or can make intelligible. One readily sees that it is the counterpart of an idea of reason, which conversely, a concept to which no intuition, representation of the imagination, can be adequate. They, aesthetic ideas, at least strive towards something lying beyond the bounds of experience, and thus seek to approximate a presentation of the concept of reason. So these are intellectual ideas, which gives them the appearance of an object of reality. On the other hand, and indeed principally, because no concept can be fully adequate to them as inner intuitions. Yeah, so we're reading Kant now. That was end quote. So again, we've got these rational things which we can grasp. So like the idea of a pencil, you can like pencil, not very interesting. But then the idea of beauty is so outstripping like this mundane pencil that how could you actually capture the same sort of thing with like, pencil and beauty? Saying beauty as a concept just does not cover what beauty is, and same with like concept of God, as like I just completely exhaust the idea of pencil because, we all know what pencil is. Okay. In what way is the aesthetic idea a counterpart of the idea of reason? In the first critique, Kant had argued that, unlike the concepts of the understanding, the idea of reason cannot in principle have any objective validity. While the concepts of the understanding have corresponding schemata that direct and limit their application, these are lacked by the ideas of reason. Okay. Furthermore, because ideas of reason are of unconditioned totalities, no intuition can be adequate to them. As Kant notes, if they contain the unconditioned, then they deal with something under which all experiences belong, but that is never itself an object of experience, something to which reason leads through its interferences, and by which reason estimates and measures the degree of its empirical use, but that never constitutes a member of the empirical synthesis. End quote. On the other hand, all objects of possible experience are members of the empirical synthesis and are as such conditioned. Yeah, so I mean, pencil is conditioned, beauty, rational, and unconditioned. It just keeps going. The idea of reason are greatly significant in two regards. First, they have a regulative function, and that led us to unify principles. Quote, the unity of principles is a demand of reason, and they have supreme importance in the practical sphere, since among them are found the ideas of freedom, moral law, and maximum of virtue. Moreover, it is through practical reason and our interests in the meaning of our existence from a first-person point of view that ideas of unconditioned totality such as God, the soul, and the world gain significance. These condition the core of our existence and are the arena in which it must play itself out. Yeah, so you've got all these ideas like God, totality, freedom. These are things we don't have control over. Like beauty, it just keeps going. Freedom just keeps there's always more freedom. And so this is how we define ourselves. While an idea of reason is one to which no intuition can be adequate, it is as such, quote, indemonstrable, end quote. The aesthetic idea is a representation of an individual so rich in significance that no concept is adequate to it. It is what Kant calls, quote, inexponable representation, end quote. Through its saturation and innumerable connections with the entire field of existence, it intimates the supersensible objects to which the ideas of reason refer. Kant notes that the aesthetic idea, quote, serves the idea of reason instead of logical presentation, although really only to animate the mind by opening up for it the prospect of immeasurable field of related representations, end quote. The aesthetic idea cracks open the understanding which continually strives to grasp the intuition, but fails to find a concept adequate to it, as the realm of the understanding is limited to the conditioned appearances. The saturation of the aesthetic idea and its innumerable connections thereby become symbols of the comprehensive ideas of reason. I know this is a lot of Kant stuff, so if you have questions, let me know, but it's just, we're trying to outline what goes beyond our rationality and how we point to it using our rational concepts. I ain't saying this is a good idea, but this is definitely what Kant thinks and what a lot of people think. So you have to realize we've got what we can talk about and then how we can sort of intimate at other things that draw us in other directions. Since the aesthetic idea is the counterpart of an idea of reason, again, we have reasonable things that point us in some of these directions, and there's the counterpart where we're getting drawn to by these reasonable ideas. It is more closely associated with Kant's sublime than with the beautiful. Earlier in the third critique, Kant remarks, quote, "The beautiful seems to be taken as the presentation of an indeterminate concept of the understanding, but the sublime is that of a similar concept of reason." Yeah, so the sublime is the thing that really pulls us. We can see something that's beautiful, but the sublime just like is the whole totality of pulling us forward in some direction because it overwhelms us. He lists the, quote, "wide ocean enraged by storms whose visage is horrible," end quote, as provoking the sublime. And the dynamically sublime nature is presented as an overwhelming might that annihilates our own. As such, it invokes fear. So Kant, quote, "Nature can count as a power, thus as dynamically sublime, only insofar as it is considered an object of fear," end quote. The sublime, however, is not constituted by this fear alone, but by the thought that the whole might of nature is inferior to the moral law within. For Kant, the moral individual and her connection to the supersensible is superior to all possible terrors of the natural world. But I mean, that seems kind of arbitrary to me. But I mean, again, we are in still a Christian tradition, so your moral standing is fundamental here. Not to say that you need to be Christian to put morals fundamental. You don't. For example, like the Cynics treated everything as, moral. But it's like the fact that you are putting the terrors of the natural world as underneath your relationship to like this like super sensible stuff. Yeah, that seems like a choice. Rocco says, so if an idea is such as beauty is accompanied by emotion, then is regarded as inexplicable and oversimplifying the idea. So it would have to be a very particular kind of emotion. You are oversimplifying, but you might not be wrong. It depends what you mean by the appropriate emotion that is coming with it. As the author just specified, it's not just beauty. It's sort of the overwhelming beauty that goes to the sublime. So if that's what you meant by emotion, then yeah. Adam says, though this view is completely different from a Christian view theology, biblically, Christ described when praying about the world that his followers are now placed within him. They are in the world, but are not of the world, each given to him from God, so that they may now have direct access to God the Father. So here no mediated intuitions concept of God needed for, or even used to understand metaphysical stuff. Rather, Christ himself is the mediator. Yeah, so this is the direct access through Christ sort of view. Again, we've got the Kantian thing here, where you've got the phenomenal world that we deal with, but then we have to also somehow be able to have access to the divine noumenal stuff. And that is not specified as Christ in this situation. So that does seem to be a difference with what you were bringing up right there. So yeah. So Otto is trying to explain this sort of thing in this Kantian way so that you can maybe recover this direct access through Christ. I mean, maybe that's what Otto's up to here, and maybe that's where this paper is going. Time is it? Oh, what time is it? Yeah. It is, however, clearly the understanding of the aesthetic idea as exponable that was to have such importance for both the Romantics and for Otto. Both in philosophy of religion and in his idea of the holy, Otto underscores Kant's understanding of spirit and its relation to both aesthetic and rational ideas as Kant's most important contributions. In philosophy of religion, he mentions Herder as having fully grasped the importance of Kant's aesthetic ideas, noting that, quote, in the whole of poetry, Herder saw a creation that urges upwards from the secret and mysterious depths of the soul, a creation of the unconscious, the unwilled, and the uninvented. an inspiration that brings from the profound regions of the spirit under divine influence, end quote. And in idea, the faculty of divination through which the holy is intuited is related to Kant's aesthetic judgments, in particular to which that is not unfolded or inexponable. He notes, quote, in contrast to logical judgment, it is the aesthetic judgment is not worked out in accordance with a clear intellectual scheme, but in conformity with obscure, dim principles, end quote. Rockophile says, I was merely oversimplifying the argument. Thanks for explaining it. No problem. Yeah. Yeah, so I think what Adam is saying is I think Otto's trying to recover what Adam tuned in was saying. It's that like you're trying to recover some sort of direct access, maybe not through Christ himself, as the mediator, but some other direct access to this world, the divine element in the world. So, okay, there's Otto further mentions Goethe's daemonic, which goes beyond all conceiving, surpassing understanding and reason, and consequently is inapprehensible and cannot properly be put into a statement, end quote, in which all elements associated with the noumen recur. Otto repeatedly affirms that both rational and non-rational elements of the noumen are a priori elements, claiming that, quote, in its content, even the first stirring of daemonic dread is a purely a priori element. In this respect, it may be compared from first to last with the aesthetic judgment and category of the beautiful, end quote. It is clear then that Otto conceived of the numinous in terms of Kant's aesthetic ideas as well as his understanding of the sublime. Yeah. So this is what we're doing. Again, the ideas we can't grasp, the ones that sort of like draw us forward, these are the ones that these are the ones in Kant that Otto is trying to set up as also a divine sort of draw or source of inspiration, I guess maybe we could put. The experience of, and for any of the atheists out there, you might consider all of these things I just said as where does your inspiration come from? It may not be divine sourced, but you may still find like inspiration in these terms. You don't need God for this metaphysics, although you might like God for your metaphysics. You don't need to put God in this. You could just take this entire metaphysics and be like, well, I am inspired by the natural beauty of the world, and that's what draws me on. You could do this whole thing without the religious connotation. There's nothing that's going to stop you here. So you may like this as a philosophy without the religious aspect. The experience of the numinous is an experience of a particular that both terrifies and fascinates, and which, however, also represents unconditional totalities. Like you said, like I was just saying, this line right here, there's nothing that is going to require you to invoke God for this. You can just do nature if you want. Or like psychology, a whole bunch of other things. For example, insofar as it is experienced as an overwhelming might, the noumen symbolizes the very ground of all power. The noumen has an overplus of meaning and thereby functions in the same way as an aesthetic idea. Because it is given in an intuition in which distinct elements are united, synthetic judgment can be made of it. This brings us to one of the more obscure elements in Otto's presentation of the holy, the necessary synthesis between its rational and non-rational aspects. Okay, I was waiting for this because the author said they were going to do it. And here's the question. This is the pineal gland right here. How do you bridge the rational and irrational parts of the world, the things that somehow is going to get you from what you're going to jump the gap between the mind and the body, the holy and the non-holy? The rational aspect is not contained in the irrational aspect. These are two distinct predicates and one cannot be derived from the other. They are, however, united in the object and necessarily so. Hence, Otto claims, quote, the same a priori character belongs to the connection of the rational and non-rational elements in religion, their inward and necessary union. He notes that the irrational element of the holy is, quote, schematized by its rational element and is filled out and charged with rational elements. Now, the schema, according to Kant, is a rule of synthesis generated by the imagination through which an image adequate to a concept is generated. In the case of aesthetic ideas, of course, these rules of synthesis are never adequate to the intuition, and conceptualization fails. The aesthetic representation is inexponable. Otto too notes that even as this necessary schematization occurs, the non-rational aspect of the holy is never fully taken up into its rational aspects. There is an overplus that still eludes rationalization and is, quote, even intensified, end quote, as the revelation proceeds. Yet insofar as an aesthetic representation suggests the rational ideas, it must ultimately be taken up or synthesized in such a way that it is understood in accordance with moral and religious ideas having to do with the ultimate significance of human life. Okay, so it says, look, you're going to fail, but you might as well try anyway, because it has to do with the ultimate significance of human life. So it's like, give it a shot. See how far you can get. Alright. How then does the aesthetic idea illuminate the a priori structures of consciousness that make it possible for revelation to have significance for us? In the aesthetic idea, we have a symbol of the mystery that is given in original consciousness. The symbol awakens the mind and brings it back to that first original moment prior to reflection. That hit, the immediate phenomenological power of whatever it was you experienced in the world. You're getting that hit. That's the symbol that you get from the original consciousness of the thing. The symbol awakens the mind and brings back to that first original moment prior to reflection. The holy, much like the aesthetic idea, can only be adequately interpreted from this first person point of view. That's why I brought up phenomenology. Both the aesthetic idea and the representation of the holy have subjective universality, is because each of us is a finite creature who acts, who must understand both self and world, and who must reflect on his or her own significance in relation to the indemonstrable totalities with which religion is concerned, that the holy is of utmost significance. Its non-rational elements concern our finitude and powerlessness in the face of an ultimate reality against which we must measure the significance of our lives. Its rational elements concern those moral concepts through which we must measure what we have done and should do, and which necessarily schematize and fill out the non-rational elements of the holy. In the holy, much like in the aesthetic idea, I am presented with a particular object of experience that works on the spirit in such a way that it is confronted with ultimate totalities, with the enormous power of the ground of being, both terrifying and fascinating, but which nevertheless is necessarily schematized by rational moral ideas. So yeah, like you can't do it, but you can't do it properly, but you do it nevertheless anyway, and you get something out of it. Otto notes that, quote, once enunciated and understood the idea of the unity and goodness of the divine, nature often takes a surprisingly short time to become firmly fixed in the hearer's mind, end quote. Rational ideas are always presented in our reason and need only be awakened. Yeah, so basically, I guess what is going on here, although I don't know if they said it very well, it's that you get concepts of the divine that you can grasp. But once you get those in, they sort of act on you in a certain way. So it says, you don't act like it's often take a surprisingly short time to become firmly fixed in the hearer's mind. And so it's like you have to get these ideas in, and then it sort of creates stuff within you, which is how people talk about this sort of area. You get the idea, and then it causes you to change. You have to go search out the holy now, but whatever that is, those graspable things sort of are enough to get you going. Okay. Following Kant, Otto stresses that we cannot ignore the moral or rational elements of the holy. In religion, Kant stresses that, quote, on the basis of revelation alone, and, quote, without the moral concepts of pure practical reason, quote, there can be no religion, and all reverence for God would be idolatry, end quote. Hence, we cannot simply remain with the idea of God as wholly other, which Otto coordinates with the idea that the intuition of the numinous is inexponable. The intuition of the holy must necessarily be schematized by moral concepts. Yeah, so you need to actually do this thing that they say you can't do. As Otto notes, were we to fail to do so, God would remain ex lex, outside the law, and we could only relate to God in terms of power. As Kant argued in his Religion Within the Boundaries of Mere Reason, we would then be left with a religion of mere servility, one bereft of the moral ideas that alone confer on the human being genuine worth. Yeah, so we'd only have our dumb worldly things, and we would not actually get to any sort of actual divine stuffs. Quote, although it certainly sounds questionable, it is in no way reprehensible to say that every human being makes a god for himself. Indeed, he must make one according to moral concepts, attended by the infinitely great properties that belong to the faculty of exhibiting an object in the world, commensurate to these concepts, in order to honor in him the one who made him. For in whatever manner a being has been made known to him by somebody else and described as God, indeed, even if such a being might appear to him in person, if this is possible, a human being must yet confront this representation with his idea first in order to judge whether he is authorized to hold and revere this being as divinity. Hence, on the basis of revelation alone, without that concept being previously laid down in its purity at the foundation and as touchstone, there can be no religion, and all reverence for God would be idolatry. End quote. And this paper is getting wild. You loving it? Yeah. So, like I said, this person seems like a competent philosopher. I don't know what the hell's going on sometimes, but like you're seeing like this, it's really ramping up. So yeah. Not Vedas, what's up? This is the first time seeing a channel really speak about philosophy. I usually go around unrelated streams with the philosophy tag, and they often end up confused after I ask them something. Yeah, I'm a published philosopher. This is published work of philosophy. We discussed that here a bit. And there's a few of us. Like there's some people in chat. I was saying, oh, you know who I didn't shout out today? Our good buddy Aristotle. We can give him a shout out. See if he is lurking. He is not lurking. Okay. But like our buddy Aristotle, he's a professor of ethics. So if you're looking for actual philosophy and like competent discussion from people who like, you know, put time into this, we're around. There just ain't that many of us. So, but like, yeah, this is one of the things I do here. This was a request that I read this paper on stream and give it some analysis. So that's what we're doing today. Not that I do this every fucking stream usually, but like this paper is specifically a request. So I don't normally do religious philosophy, but I'm not against it. And so that's what we're doing today. But yeah, hope you're having a good day, not of us.
I salute you.
Thank you for the follow. And yeah, and I mean, I can give. Let's see if the old shout out works. Because Barraday is also here. Our buddy Barraday. Does not work, but you know. But yeah, Barraday is also a philosopher, and he's in chat. He's probably lurking because he's in Australia, and so he stops by on his lunch break. But like, he's not. He's probably back at work. So, but like, yeah. I'll give him a shout out again in a minute. But like, yeah, there are a few of us. And then there's also Luminous Bloom, who's a Heideggerian. Yeah, not Devas. If you give me an idea of like what you're looking for, I can maybe direct you. But Barraday and Luminous Bloom are continentals. I'm analytic. Aristotle is a classicist and a virtue ethicist. So it's like, there are a few of us around. Okay, in the Numinous, continuing this paper, in the Numinous, the individual is confronted with her finitude and conditioned character in a radical way. Otto repeatedly draws attention to the understanding of the self as, quote, but dust and ashes, end quote, in the face of an overpowering might that is symbolized in ideograms whose significance is ultimately recognized by the soul at its ground. But how must the individual respond to this overwhelming might? To simply respond to it in such a way that all that an individual recognizes as an overpowering might ultimately leads to fear and the strategy of self-preservation. Energy says, although to my understanding, none of y'all are partisans for either analytic, continental, or classical philosophy. No, we're usually, I'm promiscuous. I, like, the stuff I tend to write about is very analytically tinged. I have a nasty Heidegger habit. Like when Luminance is here, we're like joking about Heidegger a lot. And yeah, everyone is pretty good about not being jerks. So like that's fair energy. But it's like if you're gonna talk about analytic stuff, it's like, yeah. I mean, I do some of that too. Okay. Yeah, about me. If anyone's new here, just stopping by, I am Noah, Noger, No Gray, whatever. Just don't be a jerk about what you call me. I write on metaphysics, philosophy of logic, and theory of knowledge. So I'm published in like philosophical logic, epistemology, metaphysics. So hopefully I'll get some more publications. And hopefully I'll write something up on public philosophy soon too, because I'm doing public philosophy right here. Yeah. Okay. Here, there are no higher values and no way that the self can really move beyond itself to recognize the value of others for their own sake from within itself. Otto is of a mind with Kant on this. Reason generates its own ideas of totality that must ultimately be synthesized with the totalities intuited at the ground of the soul. Hey, what's up, Koss? Is coming to take the believers away for more information, joining my new cult, Third Eye Binding, which please reach out with your open wallet, mind. Yeah, exactly. How you doing? I hope you're having a good day, Koss. Okay, yeah. So again, if you can't make any rational concept of these bigger, rational ideas that you can only intuit, then you're never going to increase your knowledge of those things. You're just going to be afraid. So something must happen with the rationalization here. So you do something with it. Hence, the ideogram points upwards and downwards to the ground of the soul and the totalities intuited through the original consciousness, and upwards to the ideas of reason, in which totalities are thought but not intuited. In the ideogram and through the imagination's attempt to grasp it, the two, namely reason and intuition, are brought together. This synthesis is not one that can be proven, but it is one that is achieved through the moral individual that makes a moral decision. Faith that at the heart of existence, there lies a moral character. Okay, so I got there. Yeah. As above, so below. Yeah, well, not exactly, but what's up, K-Pars? But yeah. All right, so we got to this. I didn't realize I was at the end. I thought I had another 4 pages, but okay, cool. Yeah, so this was something. But as always with the somethings we do here, we rate the paper now. So if you're in chat, moral order, not character. What did I say? Lies a moral order. You're right. Sorry about that, Adam. But anyway, this is the emote review. If you're in chat, tell me how you feel about the paper. I got here late, but it seemed like a scream. Yeah, so this was, if you thought this had fun ideas and gave you something to think about, brain dance. Spelling and capitalization do count here. Nog Scream for existential artistic drama. This was religious, so you might consider how to live and understand the world in existential, but I can see why you'd say that. Nog Oral for deep ancient ideas, Nog Knife for slicing and dicing arguments, Nog Navel gazing only for academics, Nog Turd for all style no substance, still poop underneath, and Nog Grapes for big claims that shrivel up. You can also use the global, vote yay and vote nay of Twitch as a general thumbs up, thumbs down, or my vote meh, which brings everything towards the middle. It's just a meh. Because I do calculate an overall score, and anything in the green makes the overall score goes up, anything in the red makes it go down, and the meh goes everything towards the middle. So yeah, Cost was engrossed. That's cool. You missed everything, but you're at work. Hey, audiobook, it happens. Laffian says yay and a meh. Rocco Fowler gave it a brain dance and a yay. Cool. Energy gave it a knife. Brain dance, an oro, and 2 yays. Yeah, so if this is your jam, if you're in this tradition, I can see how this would be a nice paper. As I was saying with Baraday earlier, who I wanted to shout out again because we've got some new people here. Yeah, so if you don't know Baraday, I have to wait more time. All right, fuck, can't give Baraday a shout. Adam gave it a Ouroboros, a Nog Navel, a dance, and a yay. Yeah, so Charlie Borkowski, all science relies on one premise, then I'm not a brain in the vat. Yes. So again, I thought this was competently done. They know their history, they know their Kantian philosophy, as far as I can tell. I'm not a Kant scholar, and they interpreted this Otto character, who I don't know, also Rudolf Otto, who's I think a theologian, in this Kantian tradition, and try to show how using Kant they could recover a Christian sort of way of accessing the divine in the world. And can we do this? Well, Otto looks to find a Kantian method to like circumvent the phenomena to get directly at the noumena, and perhaps this is a successful attempt. So, but like that's an interesting thing. Can you, in this tradition of Kantianism, which says you do not have access to the world as such, you get access to the phenomena just like, whatever our senses give us, which can be wrong. Can you actually get at the way the world is, the divine, whatever is out there, assuming that you think divine's out there? But given that, how could you possibly access that directly? Well, this gives you a way. And so, yeah. Orvo, kinda. Yeah, I mean, Adam, that's fair. You have to be in this tradition. If, like, say I was, I don't know, a Buddhist, and I have no idea what this sort of, like divine revelation from like Christ is. It's like I don't have a Christ figure that I can divinely like appeal to. Maybe like it doesn't mean anything, and I apologize to the Buddhists if that was just wrong about it. But it's like you get the idea. If you're not in this tradition, it may not be there may not be much of a pull. Yeah. Why can't you do science if you're a brain in the vat, Charlie? I think you can. You just wouldn't be doing the same kind of science we would be doing, but that wouldn't really solve your problem. You could still measure the speed of light. I always thought about this. The speed of light, if you're measuring the speed of light, but you're a brain in the vat, the speed of light's still the speed of light. Why wouldn't it be the speed of light? Now, maybe it's the speed of light of the simulation, and that speed of light is the limit of which the simulation runs. But then again, that would be a fundamental thing. That would be the limit of your simulation, and you'd be doing science on your simulation. That would be okay. So I think you could do science as that you're not a brain in a vat. It just wouldn't matter. All right, so what do I say about this paper? I thought this was well done. So I thought, this was kind of historical. We're going to give it a scream. Let's go, Nog. Scream. Brain dance. I mean, the history was not bad. Like, it was nice to hear some, like, some, well done discussion of Kant that didn't, really screw it up. So it's going to get a Nog knife. I'm with Ivan there. I know this is not Ivan's style philosophy. He gave it a knife, and a navel gazing. But I agree with the knife. It was like a technical paper about not so technical stuff. So this is kind of they did a good job in the technical analysis here. Now, do I feel like I wouldn't give it a turd. Like, this is one of these, like, you have to be in the tradition, but that's from the get-go. And so it's like, I don't know, like, maybe this is good philosophy. Like, seems like a nice historical paper. I really shouldn't say anything bad about it. It just seems fine. Maybe I'll just stick with just the scream and the knife, because it's a good paper. Is this the best philosophy ever? I have no idea. I just don't know. It's not my area. This is like theology stuffs. Cool. Like, just cool. It's like, now I get to know what those people think about. Not the way I think about stuff, but like, it's fine. All right. But if anyone else wants to get their stuff in, yeah, be excellent to each other. Exactly. And party on, dudes. Like, party on, dudes. Anyone else wants to get their reviews in, now's the time. 60 seconds left, and then I will find some place to drop you off. Doing this, kind of ruins me. Yeah. I'm trying to give... Can I give Barrett a shout out or no? I can only shout out people once an hour. Charlie says, I'm trying to say that you cannot prove anything but yourself, and everything relies on that fact. I mean, so you're one of these, I think, therefore I am people. So you've got the Descartes, but like, sure, even if you're a brain in the vat, you don't know, like, you still exist at that point. You just happen to be a brain in the vat. What do you mean by prove at that point, though? Like, what do you mean prove? Like, prove in the sense of, like, logical proof? Because that's a very specific thing. But, like, scientifically, we prove things all the time. Now, if you're trying to say, like, there could be, like, an evil genius or another reality we don't know about, that's not the sort of thing you can argue for anyway. It's just a sort of a fantasy. It's like, can you tell me Harry Potter world doesn't exist also? It's like, well, you're proving a negative. Like, that doesn't, like, what do you mean by prove at that point? Adam says, I didn't get what he meant at the end when he said the irrational noumena remained inaccessible because rational is the limit, all we could get at. I was trying to conceptually engineer an irrational noumena. It couldn't be a violation of logical rules. Yeah, so this is the problem. They're trying to jump this gap. How do we talk about the irrational when we only can talk about rational stuff, really? Thank you for providing stream note. Well, thank you for being here, Rockophile. So how do you jump the gap? And so what it looks like at the end is that even though we can never properly conceptualize these big concepts like freedom, God, the sublime, what we can do is we can get like intermediate steps where these intermediate concepts, which both reach down into our experience and reach up towards the irrational, like big concepts. So what we have are these sorts of like footholds, basically, as we are climbing up, or sort of like float, like, you know, we're kind of getting pulled in two directions. We're falling down, like the gravity's pulling us to our experience, and that's like the rational stuff. But then these also were like, you know, getting pulled up by the sort of like the upward motion of the like big sublime concepts. And so you can't actually capture the sublime, but in some sense you can be pulled in both directions and be kind of stable in the middle. And that's kind of what's going on here, is that you're being pulled in two directions, and these concepts are unstable, but kind of like relatively stable over, you know, shorter periods. And that's what we have, is these sort of like semi-stable concepts about what's going on in our world and how we are supposed to like have like access to these bigger things. Yeah. Charlie says, metaphysics, there's a stack of facts that rely on another. I believe in physics, the facts are correct, but at the bottom of the totem pole might be rotten structures. Yeah, that's fair. Jacqueline says, all I can say in short is trying to deal with this person in Christianity. I believe the problem is a ton of cultural issues that has definitely destroyed cultures and not been the motivation of preservation, the whole purpose of conservatism to these people. Yeah, I mean, how people use these ideas is very different. Like if you're talking cultural issues and people actually acting like Christians, it's like, yeah, lots of people claim it. They don't actually act it. Yeah, that's, I mean, there's the always in practice, and what actually are we getting? And it's like that's the issue here. Like, what are the concepts that are actually employed to do the work here? Because again, you only get the rational concepts. What are you actually employing that you think is actually connecting to these big ideas like God or whatever it is, like the sublime? Who knows? Like, I don't know.